I'm just a person that was very lucky. I did something that I liked since I was a kid, which was writing code, getting into computers. At the time, it wasn't a popular thing.
Oren Dobronsky, thank you so much for joining me on 20 Minute Leaders. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
I am blushing. I'm a huge, huge fan. I have to say, I'm a huge fan on several fronts. First of all, your hummus helped me get through many final exams at Stanford. Not just me, but about all of my dorm. That it's Stanford's favorite restaurant, have no doubt. Second thing is the direct flight between San Francisco and Tel Aviv. I believe you had quite an important hand in making that happen.
Yeah,
So my father,
yeah.
myself, and everybody else really thank you for that. But more importantly than that, Oren, you have an incredible streamline of entrepreneurship endeavors that you've had. Most recently, an incredible one, Clear Giving, that I can't wait to hear about. But also a pretty prominent now TV persona through the Sharks in Israel. So, wow, Oren, how do you do so many things?
I don't know. I guess I can't help it. That's the right answer.
I love that answer. But
um,
tell me how you started. You went to Mamram,
yes,
and
right,
from there,
right,
how does this
right.
happen?
So I consider myself very lucky. That's the bottom line. I'm just a person that was very lucky. I did something that I liked since I was a kid, which was writing code, getting into computers. At the time, it wasn't a popular thing. My parents used to shout at me, why don't you go out and play? And I said, I just love it. And I used to play a lot with my computer. And then it was very natural for me to go to Amram. And when I was leaving the army, it was 96, and I really had this vision of what the internet can happen. And back then in Israel in 96, very few people thought, about the upcoming revolution. So I started my first startup in 97 just because I felt that, again, this was like I had to do something about it. And I created my first, startup. It was the first Craigslist. I didn't even know about Craigslist, but I started
Wow.
a Craigslist in Israel, a bulletin board. And I mean, the market wasn't ready. So I had to close that a year later. It was a big heartache. And thank God I had a girlfriend at the time who told me, you must work on the second one. And I told her, it doesn't work, this internet. And she said, no, 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 you must do it. And so I started my second one, and then I basically hit the jackpot. I came up with a concept of a toolbar, and I wrote a patent over a toolbar, and that became, history. We were everywhere.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
Literally everywhere. That is Hotbar, correct?
right. That was Hotbar. We had an estimate that we had like one in every four computers in the world had our toolbar installed at the time.
That is just unbelievable. Talk to me a
Yeah,
little bit about that resilience of being a young entrepreneur. Your first startup fails. With the inspiration and
right,
motivation from your girlfriend, you move on to the second startup, and it skyrockets
right,
to the point where
right.
you're literally in a quarter of the computers in the world. What was that transition like? How do you fathom that transition?
Well, even then, the mindset, it was so, everything was so, every day there were new things. People didn't really know. There were no, today, it's funny, today when you start stuff, there's so much material to read about and to learn,
Right.
even when you went to Stanford. At the time, there was nothing. Anyone who did anything in the internet space, it was all discovery. It was a totally like Wild West, think about it this way. We needed to invent, from the methodologies and, what are you going to do, how you're going to do. There were no tools. You need to build everything yourself. Obviously, there was no cloud. So we needed really to figure out what we were doing. And it also the markets were difficult. So then 2000 came and everything tanked, and we needed to stay afloat in a very difficult year.
Unbelievable. I have to say that
Different times.
I spent 5 years in 8200, which was a phenomenal experience. I'm sure very similar to the experience at Mamram. And then going to California and seeing what's happening there. Literally every corner at Stanford, there's a class teaching you how to start a startup. Every kid that
Right.
walks on campus is thinking,
Right.
what am I going to do? In 97, 98, that wasn't the case. You didn't have
No.
a class on every
No.
corner helping you, which is amazing.
No, there was nothing. I needed to explain that what I'm doing is I'm a computers company in a special field called the internet. It was a kind of a subset of being in computers.
Wow, that is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
I want to fast forward the journey a little bit, and I want to make sure that we
Yeah.
very soon get to clear giving your most recent endeavor. But you
Right.
have two stints along the way that are very irregular for the average Silicon Valley entrepreneur. The first one is something that we can all thank you for allowing us to travel back and forth to Tel Aviv and San Francisco. That is a startup by itself, it sounds like, because
Right.
that was quite a
Right.
journey. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that was totally an irrational thing to do, right? So I was living in the Valley. I moved to the Valley in 2008. So I moved to New York in 2000. I lived there 8 years. I already sold my startup, Hot Bar. I exited. I made some money. Then I had another one. That one also went well. And then I moved to the Valley. And then living in the Valley, having to take this daunting flight to Tel Aviv once or twice a year when you need to stop somewhere and collect your luggage and move it to a different terminal and all kind of crazy shit. I just said, this cannot be the case. So I contacted United and they said to me, Oren, there's just not enough demand. And I said, well, this is not possible. There's so many startups here, so many Israelis, but not just Israeli here. There's so many American startups that have a location in Israel that need to fly people from Google to Facebook. I mean, anyone I knew had a
Yes.
big center in Tel Aviv. And so I decided to do a petition. And, about 10,000 people signed a petition committing to flight 36,000 flights,
Wow.
round-trip tickets. And with that, I basically came back to all the airlines and I said, guys, there is a demand. And there was a phase there, that United just got tired of me. And, it's funny because after they launched that direct line, 2 months after that, they had this national convention. They have an annual convention where all the managers meet in United. And the guy who is in charge on route planning is going to the stage and he says the following. He says, I don't know how these Israelis knew more than all our algorithms, but this is the number one flight in our network and we couldn't see it.
That is really unique. How do you explain that? Is it that
Well,
they fly under the radar?
Look, I think that they looked at Tel Aviv and San Francisco as two random locations, like, Boston and Rome, okay? And I told them, no, these are two tech hubs.
Right.
That the companies who work in these places will definitely use your business class, right? They will, if they have an option to fly direct, they will not fly indirect because of price.
Yes.
And maybe it's my fault that the prices went so high, but United said, okay. So let's have a bigger business class. Let's, charge a lot of money. And guess what? People just were willing to pay any price to have a direct flight instead of wasting a day.
I mean, it's a very simple market, right? You're on one hand, when you have the regular flight, you're applying to the larger market. Most of it is business and leisure. But here, not many people take a vacation to San Francisco, right? That's not most people.
Right.
So I think that's just unique. But that was minor compared to the innovative nature of Oren's hummus that I have to say, Oren, I'm in Tel Aviv. I eat hummus here every day, and somehow I find myself missing your restaurant. Not just one, but the many chains.
No way, I don't.
Malasot.
That is, you are too sweet. You are too.
But you introduced the Jaffa,
no, you are too kind.
Right? The off menu Jaffa dish that one of the waiters told me about, and since then, so tell me a little bit about why start a hummus restaurant.
So again, as an entrepreneur, you just can't help it, but you always see what needs to be done. You always say, what is missing? What can be done
Right,
better? What is not,
right.
you know. Here I have to admit that not only that I saw how much it was missing, I myself missed hummus. I
Yes,
used to go to eat hummus before I board a plane to go to San Francisco. And when I come back, the first thing to do is go to eat hummus. And I
yes.
said, let's have a place basically for the Israelis. I didn't think about it too much. I just wanted a place for us. And my wife thought at the time that I was a little bit crazy. And I told her, Nancy, you are right. Consider it like a midlife crisis, but we'll have a place. And she has experience. I was very lucky to have her because she has a restaurant experience. And so she helped me open it in the beginning because I didn't know what I was doing. And the one thing that I insisted on is that we will keep it like the best quality possible. We were not aiming into profitability. We said we are going to, and let me give you an example. So from day one, we would import the grains themselves from Israel in a
Really?
boat. Think about it. Grain needs to go halfway around the world to be on your plate there. And the tahini, we bought the whole pita machine because there were no decent pitas in the radius. So it was
Wow.
really, how would I say it? It was not a financial project. It was a project that comes from the soul. And some people are saying that this is the recipe for success. I don't know if that's true, but it really came from a place to do the best, the best food I can do. My only role was, other than financing it, my only role was to make sure that the taste is the way I remember it, to be as authentic, because some people along the way suggested that maybe we should adjust it to the American palate. And I said, no way, we are going to do it exactly the way it is in Israel. And I think that's where the charm is, that suddenly there was such different taste, such different experience. When we opened, we had Americans who came in, and the fact that you use your hand to rip the pita and scoop, it
On
was
the
like
big wall,
mind blowing.
you
Right? We
have
have
the whole.
a hummus eating guide, right? We explain how to do it because people didn't know how to do it. And somebody told me, this is the best place for a date. You just come and you share and you rip. It's unique. So when you say that you miss it when you're in Israel, in Israel there's a hummus in every corner, and people are like die-hard fans of one hummus, and they don't never step in another hummus. California was a desert. If there were anywhere
Right.
near a decent hummus, I wouldn't have opened. The only reason I opened is that I
Oh,
couldn't find anything decent.
and Oren, of course, I have to mention that the missing ingredient from everything that you mentioned, which exists there, is when you walk down University Avenue or Castro, you hear Shlomo
Yeah.
Artzi coming from one of the restaurants,
Right.
and that
Right.
just warms the heart of every Israeli that walks there. But Oren, we
Totally.
have to
And that's
fast forward
totally my
because
wife. That's totally my wife. Yes, yes, yes.
that's genius. We have to fast forward because we only have 20 minutes. We have to still talk about
Sure.
clear giving, and we completely skipped over the fact that you're a huge TV celebrity in Israel now, known as a startup guru. Investing as part of the Shark Tank show, but we'll leave that for another discussion. Oren, you after all of that incredible success and endeavors,
Yeah.
which I have to say that the most inspirational part for me is not the toolbar and it's not the startup in '97. It's about this lifelong mentality of being an entrepreneur, and it's about
Yeah.
your motivation to go and fix whatever you see happening around you. And I think that is just so incredible, and that's a mentality that I wish for myself. I wish for all my friends, for everybody that's surrounding me. So I really want to thank you for that. I talk to me a little bit about clear giving. What happened that you said
Sure.
now I want to make a social impact?
Yeah, so clear giving is actually a continuation of a project that I did for many years before that. So when I had some money to give, and I really started to struggle where I'm giving it. I felt that just giving it to the
Right.
first random nonprofit is just not the right thing. You need to treat it with respect, as if this is, you are serious about getting it to the right places. And none of the nonprofits, none of the organizations that I worked with offered the level of transparency that I would be used to. You usually give a big sum of money, but you don't really know what happened with it. You don't know the
Right.
impact. You don't know where it goes. You have no control of where it's going. So for many years, I used to employ an individual who used to find me families in need that I could support them directly. So after doing that for more than 10 years, I basically decided, you know what, how about taking it to the next level? How about productizing it and basically doing again what I wished would be when I started giving, which is basically someone who could build for you a portfolio of families, right? And that's basically how I started Clear Giving. I basically said we will make a website where we first of all we screen families that need support in Israel. We get them all from the Revacha, which is the social services in Israel, the governmental social services. We screen them. They need to pass certain criteria before we upload a certain profile of them on the website. Obviously, it's anonymous. You cannot know who they are, but you get to know the story. So you, as a donor, you can go into the website and choose families you want to support.
Amazing.
Initially, we called it like Adopt a Family. Some people felt it's like too much, so we said, let's call it Clear Giving. Another big feature, other than knowing who you are giving the money, is that we said 100% of the donation goes to the family. So we separate the operational cost. We have dedicated donors for the operational cost. At this point, it's me, but in the future, it can be other people as well. But the vast majority of donors, if they give $1, then $1 goes to a needy family.
So, Oren,
that gives you a feeling that you are not. We are not. There's no conflict of interest.
100%.
This is I like to say it's the biggest bang for the buck. You give $10,000, $10,000 go to families. Right? There's nothing being taken out.
I have to ask, because first of all, regarding that last point, it's fascinating because when they do take a cut or a margin from the donation, then obviously the more they market, the more they make, and then there's a conflict of interest. But I have to ask about the distinction. A lot of the nonprofits that I'm aware of, and a lot of the organizations, you give them the money and they promise that they'll disseminate it to those that are in need, but you don't have that story. You're missing that individuality aspect. And when you're mentioning that you're telling the story of a family, even though it's anonymized, I feel like I'm giving to that family. So tell me about this model.
You picked it. So I want to give the benefit to you as a donor that you know who you helped. It's like if it wasn't for you, they did not have food on the table, right? I mean, this is literally, you chose them, you picked them, and your money is going to them, and you get reports to the last cent, where it went. Another important thing that we said is that we believe that helping people in need is something that, people who need food, people who need clothing, people who need basic things, I want to help them. There are many nonprofits today that help on a higher magnitude. We will build a big matnas. You know what a matnas is? A big school. We will
build a community center. Yeah.
We will change poverty. You know what? I think it's important, but I think it's also important to help the poor person who cannot feed his kids or who cannot buy his daughter, a ballet hobby because he doesn't have money. And just think about the drama that these people are living in. If you can help them get something, so basic that we all are taking for granted, I think that's a big mitzvah. I think people need to think about it when they do philanthropy. They need to say, I have big goals and I have, immediate help that I can offer. I like to say it's like you're planning a financial portfolio, right? You sometimes invest in high risk. You go to startups and you go to maybe equity, but you also have bonds and with low risk products. And the same thing here. You need to think long term, but you also need to give fish to the poor person who's standing at your door and is asking. You cannot tell him, oh no, I'm going to send a kid to the university. That's nice. I'm going to give a tuition to a kid, right? A scholarship. Yeah, that's nice. But what about the young people who need the help right now?
100%.
So I like to think that this is the solution. What we started doing, and I think it's valuable to say, is that we started as really offering this service to anyone with a credit card. So people could, give $10 or $5, whatever they want, they can give, and it's a monthly thing that they support a family. By the way, whenever we get to $200 a month, that's what we want to raise per family. Then that family goes off the site, and now we will help another family. So
Wow.
that's the quota. But my point is that we recently started doing, basically a service to bigger donors. So people who want to give me $10,000, right, or $20,000. And what we said is that we will build a portfolio for them. Think about it as a managed
Yes,
portfolio.
yes. I was
So
just about to
so
ask about that.
right.
Yes.
So if $200 a month, right, times 12, it's 24. For $2,400 a year, you can basically take a family in need, families with very difficult stories, and basically move them into a totally different place. It might not change them. It's not that they are not poor anymore, but you take so much drama, bad drama, out of their life. You give them support. You give them the basics. Now whatever extra money they have, they use on buying something. They buy a new shoes for their kids, right, or stuff like that. But in any event, think about it. If you for 10,000, for almost 11,000, right, 10,800, you help 5 families a year.
Right.
I don't think other nonprofits, can offer something like that, because usually, again, when you think long term, then you need to invest more, and it takes longer, and things are more costly. But here, for $11,000, you basically can help 5 families, and this is what we are aiming now. We are aiming now for people who basically come to me and say, look, I'm giving you a budget. Think about like a bank account. I'm giving you a budget, and you will build me a portfolio of families. These families will stay with them. We are not going to switch them. They will be your families. We will update you what's going on with them. From time to time, they might write you a letter, but basically you will know that you support these families.
I think that's remarkable when you mentioned about the families not being poor anymore, but at least they'll give them comfort. I'm a huge fan of the pyramid of Maslow. I remember when I learned
Yeah,
about it first in middle school, I understood it so well. I was going through a heartache with a girlfriend, and I couldn't function because I didn't have my that baseline filled. And I can only imagine how difficult it is for a family.
right,
And I'm very privileged to come from a family where I never had to worry
right,
about food on the table.
right.
But
Just,
by giving them the food, by giving them some
right,
comfort, you're
right,
allowing them
right.
to think more critically about how they can then improve on the other things. And
Think,
it's like a rolling ball. It's a spiral, and
totally.
I love it. Oh,
Totally.
and
Think
I love it.
think about the shame of the parents that need to look in their kids' eyes when they cannot afford buying them shoes. When I think about it, I'm starting to bawl, because
I'm
I
tearing
I,
up right now.
I
Yeah.
have kids. If I would have a situation that I could not afford buying them something that is pretty much basic that other kids have, this is a terrible situation. So the $200 a month, as small as it sounds, makes a huge difference for these families. Unfortunately, there are so many families here in Israel now, especially, we didn't speak about that, but now with the corona, I returned to Israel for a year. I took a gap year now in August, for a year after 20 years in the States. And, I was shocked. The corona literally took families who were already in a good place and put them in a bad place. Those that were in a bad place, it put them in a place that you cannot imagine. So the level of poverty, usually you don't see it, because when you stay in Tel Aviv, Tel Aviv is like another country. It's like the Silicon Valley
It's the
in the
state of
States
Tel
completely.
Aviv. Yeah.
Right, right. When you move out of Tel Aviv and you go to Hulon and Lod and Ramle and all these places, you cannot believe what stories we found. And again, I would say, if now is a time, if there was ever a time to give, to help people directly, it's now. Now it's not a time to say, what, I'm going to save for your tuition, I'm going to change the education system. Now it's
A
not a time.
hundred
Now is the
percent.
time to just give.
Oren, thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing. You are touching literally so many lives before this, after this, during this. Thank you very, very much. Before we leave, I have to ask you the most important question, which is 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
Oh my goodness. Um, well, I'm definitely entrepreneur,
Yeah,
but I would like to say that if I'm a world benefactor, that's my goal in life.
a
I
world
want to make this
benefactor.
world, yeah, I want to make this world better on many levels.
I love
That's
it.
how I see myself.
Entrepreneur, world benefactor. I love it. Oren, toda rabba. Thank you very, very much.
Okay,
And
my friend.
this was
Thank you
really
for
great.
having me.
Of course.
Thank you for having me.